The summer of 2009 was supposed to be a celebratory time for me. Having just capped off my final year of high school, the world seemed to brim with opportunities and adventures as I awaited the start of college in the fall. I lived an hour north of a major city, nestled in a suburb that edged a vast expanse of rural wilderness, complete with winding nature trails and a rich tapestry of wildlife. It was an idyllic setting for any nature lover, and I was no exception. Life was good, and with close friends like Anya and her boyfriend Darius, whom I had introduced to each other, by my side, it felt even better. Our trio was inseparable, and I hardly minded being the third wheel, considering the strength of our bond. But I never could have imagined how quickly our blissful existence would be shattered. The last time we were all together encapsulates both the best and worst of my memories from that summer. It was a perfect summer night with clear skies and the moon casting a gentle glow, a stark contrast to the thick darkness of the forest that awaited us. Around 9 p.m., we decided to seize the beauty of the evening by gathering for a bonfire in a nearby secluded clearing, a favorite spot of ours for such escapades. We trekked along a dead-end road that led to the forest, the absence of streetlights casting everything into shadows, with only the sounds of crickets to accompany our chatter and laughter. Armed with a flashlight and our carefree spirits, we navigated the path to our usual spot, about a kilometer into the forest. Back then, not everyone had a cell phone, and that night, only Anya carried one. A dated BlackBerry meant strictly for emergencies. As we reached our clearing, the night unfolded like a scene from a movie. We set up the fire, the music filled the air, and soon enough, the beer cans were cracking open. The warmth of the fire and the buzz of alcohol drew us closer, our laughter mingling with the crackling of the flames. It was one of those moments when everything felt right in the world. However, as the night wore on and my senses dulled by the alcohol, a strange unease began to creep in. At one point, I thought I caught the flash of headlights through the trees. I hushed my friends, pointing towards the fleeting sight, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. They brushed it off, blaming it on the moonlight and my imagination. But the anxiety lodged itself in my chest, an ominous prelude to what was to come. Trying to shake off my fears, I threw myself back into the festivities. Time slipped by, and soon, the beer was gone, and it was time to pack up. We doused the fire, turned on the flashlight, and began our trek back to civilization. But as we emerged from the cover of the forest and onto the open road, a pair of headlights suddenly blazed to life, startling us. The car roared to life, speeding toward us with alarming speed before zooming past, its presence as sudden as it was menacing. Shaken, we stood in disbelief, shouting after the disappearing vehicle, unsure of whether this was a twisted joke or something more sinister. But when the car sped by us again minutes later, the situation took a harrowing turn. The reality of our vulnerability out here in the dark, far from any help, was palpable. Anya started to cry, and Darius's face was etched with fear. I urged Anya to call 911, but a frantic search revealed she had left her phone back at the clearing. Panic set in. We were stranded, alone, and hunted. As the car made another pass, this time stopping, the situation escalated quickly. The driver honked continuously, a blaring sound that shattered the night silence. Adrenaline coursed through me as I turned and sprinted into the forest, with Anya and Darius close behind. The underbrush clawed at us as we ran, the darkness enveloping us completely. Then, disaster struck. I tripped over a log, my ankle twisting painfully beneath me. The sharp pain was immediate, and I went down, the ground crashing up to meet me. From my fallen position, I could hear the car stop and the driver emerging. The sound of a car door slamming was followed by an eerie silence, then the distinct clicks of a rifle being loaded. Lying there, the beam of a flashlight swept dangerously close to where I lay hidden. I held my breath, praying to remain unseen. As the light scanned away, I heard the worst sound of all, my friends being discovered. The man's harsh, commanding voice cut through the night, ordering Anya into the car. The sounds of a struggle, cries muffled by distance and fear, reached my ears. Darius was thrown to the ground, and I heard the sickening sound of the rifles, but connecting with his head. Frozen in horror, I could do nothing but watch as the trunk slammed shut on Anya and the car sped away, leaving Darius bloodied and unconscious in its wake. The silence that followed was deafening, filled only with the echoes of what had just transpired. Gathering every ounce of strength left in me, I limped over to Darius, my heart pounding with dread and helplessness. His face was a mask of blood, his injuries severe. I propped him up as best I could, shouting his name, trying desperately to rouse him. With no phone and no immediate help, I knew I had to act fast. Ignoring the pain in my ankle, I ran. The night blurred around me, every shadow a potential threat, but I pushed forward until I saw lights. A house, my beacon of hope. Pounding on the door, I screamed for help. A woman responded, her voice a lifeline as she called the authorities. As the police arrived, the reality of our ordeal began to sink in. I recounted everything to the officers, my voice shaking as the gravity of our situation overwhelmed me. It was only when my parents arrived at the station that the full weight of the night's terror truly hit me. Safe in their presence, I allowed myself to break down, the events of the night replaying over and over in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. That night changed everything. Our innocence was lost, replaced by the harsh truth that no place, not even our beloved trails, was safe from the horrors that lurked just out of sight. The aftermath of that horrific night was a slow descent into a reality I had never imagined could be mine. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, police stations, and restless nights filled with nightmares. The trauma of what had happened, of what I had witnessed, engulfed me, swallowing the remnants of the life I once knew. Darius was hospitalized with severe head trauma, the brutality of his assault leaving him in a critical yet stable condition. Visiting him in the hospital was heart-wrenching. Seeing him so vulnerable and broken, wrapped in bandages, his face swollen and unrecognizable from the violence he endured, was a painful reminder of our shared trauma. We spoke little during those visits, the weight of our experiences a silent barrier between us. Anya was found the next day, abandoned in the trunk of a car near a local lake. A discovery that sent waves of relief mixed with horror through our community. She was alive but profoundly affected by the ordeal. The details of what she endured during those hours were kept private, a fragile veil over the atrocities she might have faced. Her family, protective and shaken, moved away shortly after, severing what few ties remained in our frayed fabric of friendship. The void her departure left was palpable, her absence a constant echo in my everyday life. The police investigation into the incident was thorough, yet frustratingly fruitless. The man who had attacked us remained a phantom, his identity obscured by the shadows of that night. Despite descriptions and tireless searches, he slipped through the cracks of law enforcement's grasp. Our small town, once a quiet, safe haven, was now marked by a dark stain, a reminder that evil could lurk even in the most idyllic settings. The impact on my life was profound. The The dreams of college and a future bright with possibility were overshadowed by a cloud of fear and anxiety. The world outside my window seemed a vast, unpredictable expanse, fraught with unseen dangers. My trust in the safety of my surroundings had been shattered, each step outside a test of my dwindling courage. I underwent therapy, a necessary measure to stitch together the fragments of my psyche left scattered by that night. Each session was a step towards healing, but the journey was arduous and littered with setbacks. Nightmares haunted me, a nightly replay of the terror, each dream ending in imagined outcomes far worse than what had transpired. My days were spent in a haze of anxiety and hypervigilance, each unfamiliar face a potential threat, each unexpected noise a trigger pulling me back to that night. The decision not to go to college was made in the depths of my turmoil. It was a choice dictated by my mental state, which frayed further with each passing day. My parents, ever supportive, became my anchor, their presence a constant in the chaotic aftermath. We clung to each other, a family bound tighter in the face of shared fear. As time passed, the acute sharpness of the trauma dulled, softened by therapy and the support of my loved ones. Yet, the scars remained, indelible marks on my soul that occasionally itched with reminders of their presence. The man responsible for the destruction of our peace was never apprehended, his specter a chilling whisper in the back of my mind, a fear that perhaps, one day, he might return. My interactions with Darius grew sparse, each meeting a reminder of our shared darkness. We drifted apart, not out of dislike, but because the past that bound us was too painful to revisit. His recovery was slow, marred by physical and emotional scars that would likely never fully heal. Our last meeting was a quiet acknowledgement of all we had lost, a silent goodbye to the innocence we could never reclaim. Anya's disappearance from my life left a void, her fate a question mark that often wandered through my thoughts. I searched for her online occasionally, hoping to find some clue that she was okay, that she had found some measure of peace away from the nightmare we had endured. But she remained a ghost, her online presence scrubbed clean, perhaps a final protective measure by a family too scarred by the past. Reflecting on those events now, years later, I realize how deeply that night altered the course of my life. The trajectory I had imagined for myself was irrevocably changed. My dreams rerouted towards a path focused on healing and rediscovering a sense of security in a world that had shown me its darkest face. Last year, amid the quiet comfort of my small-town life, I encountered a series of events that would unsettle the tranquility I had come to cherish. I lived alone in a quaint house, nestled on a tree-lined street typical of Maple Grove, a place where everyone knew each other, or so I thought. It was a typical evening around 9 p.m., not quite late enough for bed, but late enough for the neighborhood to settle into a hushed calm. I was lounging in my living room, the TV murmuring in the background, when a sharp knock at the front door sliced through the quiet. Curious and a bit cautious, I peeked out the window next to the door. A woman stood on my porch. Her presence was startling and out of place. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with long blonde hair that tumbled over the shoulders of her black sweatshirt. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure whether to open the door. When she knocked again, a sense of uneasy obligation nudged me forward. As I opened the door, she immediately asked, "Can I come inside?" Her eyes darted nervously as she spoke. I paused. "Why do you need to come in?" My voice was steady, but my mind raced. "There's someone after me," she replied quickly, her voice edged with urgency. I suggested calling the police, But before I could finish my sentence, she cut me off, pleading again to be let inside. However, something about the situation felt off. I held my ground, repeating my offer to call for help instead. She declined abruptly and, without another word, turned and hurried down the street, disappearing into the night. Puzzled and slightly alarmed, I scanned the area for any sign of pursuit, but found none. She vanished as suddenly as she had appeared. Shrugging off the uneasy feeling, I locked my door and eventually drifted off to sleep, the strange encounter slowly fading from my immediate thoughts. The next day was routine. Work, home, dinner, then relaxation. But as I settled in that evening, a movement caught my eye through the living room window. It was her again, the same woman from the night before, pacing slowly down the street. This time, as she passed by my house, she paused and seemed to look directly at me through the window. Our eyes locked for a fleeting second before she continued on, her figure soon swallowed by the dim street lights. Who was she? Why was she here? These questions nagged at me as I watched her disappear down the road. Over the next day, my curiosity turned to unease. Driving to work the following morning, I noticed a car trailing behind me. At a stoplight, a glance in my rearview mirror revealed the driver. It was her, unmistakably, despite the large sunglasses hiding her eyes. With each turn towards my workplace, the car followed. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, tension gripped me. She entered the lot right after me, then veered off in a different direction. Confusion and a growing concern clouded my thoughts as I headed into work, unsure of her intentions. For the next 2 days, she vanished as suddenly as she had appeared. Yet the silence did little to ease my nerves. I found myself peering out my windows more often, the unease lingering like a shadow. Then, one night, just past midnight, a loud crash jolted me awake. It sounded as though it came from near the back of my house. Heart pounding, I cautiously approached the source of the noise. Another crash, this time, unmistakably from the back window. Panic set in. I wasn't sure who was outside, or what they wanted, but fear rooted me to the spot. With trembling hands, I dialed the police, whispering my fears into the phone. As I waited, locked in my bedroom, noises continued. A shuffling, a faint opening of doors. It was agonizing minutes before everything fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the arrival of the police. I rushed to let them in, my voice shaking as I explained that someone might be in the basement. The officers moved quickly, and soon, they re-emerged, escorting the same woman who had haunted my doorstep and my street. As they led her away, relief washed over me, mingled with a torrent of unanswered questions. Why had she targeted me? What had she wanted? The events of those few days lingered long in my mind, a chilling reminder of the unpredictability hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. The days following the woman's arrest were a blend of relief and persistent unease. As I tried to return to my regular routine, questions about her motives and actions circled relentlessly in my mind. Who was she? What had brought her to my doorstep? And more importantly, what had she intended? The police, despite their timely intervention, could offer little in the way of answers. She had been silent, offering no explanation for her actions or her presence in my life. This lack of information only fueled my curiosity and concern, turning every unknown face on the street into a potential mystery, every unexpected knock a cause for alarm. I took to spending more time at home, fortifying my little haven with new locks and a security system that promised at least the illusion of safety. The peace of mind it brought was tenuous but necessary. As the weeks passed, The incidents with the mysterious woman began to feel more like a distant, albeit unpleasant, dream. That was until I received a call that would pull me right back into the unsettling reality I thought I had left behind. The call came on a lazy Sunday afternoon, the caller ID showing a number I didn't recognize. Curiosity overcame hesitation, and I answered. To my surprise, it was Detective Martinez from the local police department. He had been handling the case of the woman who had tried to break into my home. "Good afternoon. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." His voice was calm, businesslike, but not without a hint of empathy. "There's been some development in the case of the woman we arrested at your property. We think you should be aware." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh? What kind of development?" I asked, my grip tightening around the phone. "It appears she escaped custody a couple of days ago," he explained. "We've been trying to track her down but haven't had much luck. We believe she might try to return to familiar places, which includes your neighborhood." The news sent a shiver down my spine. The thought of her out there, potentially seeking to return, reignited all my previous fears. "What should I do?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "We're doing everything we can to find her," Detective Martinez assured. "But in the meantime, be vigilant. Keep your doors and windows locked, and don't hesitate to call us if you see anything or anyone suspicious." We ended the call with a few more instructions and reassurances, but the sense of security I had been slowly rebuilding shattered with the final click of the receiver. That night, I barely slept, every small sound a reminder of the threat that might be lurking just outside my visibility. The days turned into weeks with no sign of her, each passing moment a mixture of gratitude and gnawing anticipation. I found myself peering out the windows more often than not, jumping at shadows, my heart racing at the slightest noise. The strain of constant vigilance began to wear on me, coloring my daily life with a tinge of paranoia. One evening, as I was closing the blinds, I saw a figure moving quickly across the street. It was her. There was no mistaking it. She moved with a determined stride, her head turning briefly in the direction of my house before disappearing into the growing dusk. Panic gripped me, and without thinking, I dialed 911. The police arrived quickly, their presence a temporary balm to my frayed nerves. They searched the area but found no trace of her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, her brief appearance a ghostly reminder of my ongoing nightmare. In the weeks that followed, I became a regular at the local police station, my face becoming familiar to the officers who manned the desks. Detective Martinez kept me updated on their efforts, but it seemed she had disappeared without a trace. Eventually, life had to move on. I couldn't live in perpetual fear, jumping at every shadow, every unexpected sound. I began to seek counseling, a way to deal with the lingering effects of my ordeal. Slowly, I started to reclaim the peace that had been so brutally disrupted. Months later, as autumn painted the town in shades of orange and red, a call from Detective Martinez brought the closure I had been seeking. They had finally caught her, far from Maple Grove, in a small town where she had been hiding out. This time, they assured me, she would be securely held until her trial. The relief was palpable, freeing me from the shackles of fear that had constrained me for so long. As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a breath of freedom that filled my lungs with hopeful air. The leaves outside rustled in the gentle breeze, a natural symphony of renewal and resilience.